The serious answer is to smash the gangs. We have to take those gangs down, to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, to smash these gangs.
Why are Britons treated worse than illegal migrants? A High Court has blocked the first UK-France removal of an Eritrean man. Footage shows foreign criminals being handed £2,000 to leave the UK, and an urgent review is launched after a £600 taxpayer-funded taxi was used to take an asylum seeker to a GP appointment. Does the government ever get this under control? Plus, Britain now has more parking wardens than full-time soldiers, waging war on the motorist, with councils raking in £2.3 billion from fines and permits last year alone. And in another battle in the war on the motorist, a leading left-wing think tank wants the Chancellor to tax drivers for every mile they travel to plug the £30 billion-plus black hole created by Rachel Reeves' bungling. Is the motorist footing the bill for Labour's failure? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my preternaturally pertinacious panel, the former spokesman for Reform UK, Gawain Tola, and the political commentator Matthew Stadlen. As always, I want to know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com, but now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you. The top stories. A family of 3, including a small child, have become the first people to arrive in the UK under Sir Keir Starmer's one-in, one-out immigration deal with France. The Home Office said the move was part of critical first steps under the scheme after the removal of 4 people from Britain. The agreement, which came into force last month, is aimed at deporting migrants who've crossed the English Channel in exchange for those who apply in France and are approved to come to the UK. The government says the newly established legal route for those entering the country includes rigorous documentation as well as eligibility and security checks. The FBI says a shooting at a customs enforcement field office in Dallas is being investigated as an act of targeted violence. Police said 3 detainees were shot, 2 had died and 1 is in a critical condition. The attacker also died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Officials have now named the suspect as 29-year-old Joshua Jan. Dallas FBI Special Agent Joseph Rothrock said it was a coordinated attack and just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence. He said earlier evidence suggested the attack was anti-ICE in nature. A leaked Labour document shows Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff was told to describe £700,000 of undeclared donations as an admin error. The advice came from the party's lawyer in 2021 after the elections watchdog said the funds should have been reported. The Conservatives are demanding an investigation, accusing the Prime Minister of failing to declare support from Labour Together. The think tank, once led by Morgan McSweeney, was fined for more than 20 breaches. The London mayor has branded Donald Trump racist, sexist and Islamophobic after the president claimed the mayor wants London to go to Sharia law.
I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law, but you're in a different country. You can't do that.
Sadiq Khan hit back, saying he has squatters' rights in Mr Trump's head and is thankful for record numbers of American visitors. Labour dismissed the attack, saying the president was misreading London and stressing it remains a global hub of law, culture and creativity. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage backed Trump's concerns, saying Sharia is an issue in London, but not an overwhelming one. And Ofgem has confirmed energy suppliers must offer at least one tariff with lower standing charges from January, though the fixed costs won't be scrapped entirely. The regulator says the move will give households more choice on how they pay by shifting some of the daily fee into unit rates. It follows consumer pressure to reform the charges, which apply regardless of how much energy people use. Campaigners say the change is only a small step forwards, as bills are still set to rise by 2% in October. Ofgem will now consult before final approval, aiming to roll out the new tariffs nationwide by the end of January. Those are the latest headlines for now. It's back to Jacob.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Sir Keir Starmer is in the midst of another row over donations and integrity. It's been revealed that the Reverend Starmer's path to becoming Labour leader and now Prime Minister was heavily assisted by Labour Together. The think tank spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on polling and research, all aimed at boosting Starmer's leadership perspectives. But now it seems some of these funds may not have been properly declared. £700,000 of donations were not properly registered by Labour Together from 2017 to 2020, much of it during Keir Starmer's Labour leadership campaign for 2020. The funding was only made public months after Keir Starmer had secured the leadership. And today it's been revealed that a leaked 2021 email shows that the Labour Party's lawyer, Gerald Shamash, suggested Mr McSweeney could simply call the omission an administrative error. Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, was the director of Labour Together and also ran Keir Starmer's leadership campaign. More than £100,000 in donation came in whilst he was running the campaign. And Steve Reid and Shabana Mahmood, both now senior ministers, openly acknowledge that Labour Together played a key role in helping Starmer to win. Work and Pension Secretary Pat McFadden spoke to GBNews about this earlier today.
I'm not surprised that political opponents are trying to attack Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff at Number 10. He's very effective. He was a big part of Labour's election victory last year. So I'm not surprised they're attacking him, but the Electoral Commission's job is to police all these things, and they said they looked into it some years ago.
However, parliamentary rules clearly require MPs to declare any support in kind over £1,500. Keir Starmer's Register of Interest contains no record of this support. The story goes further when we look at the £700,000 in donation that Labour Together reportedly failed to disclose. The Electoral Commission advised the donations needed to be declared. Mr Shamash, in the leaked email, admitted there was no easy way to explain this apparent dereliction of duty. Of course, Labour would deny any wrongdoing. A Labour source told the media neither Keir nor his leadership campaign accepted monetary or in-kind donations from Labour Together during the leadership election. And a Downing Street source said everything was declared properly in relation to the leadership election. Labour Together was fined £14,250 for more than 20 breaches of electoral law, and it was only after Mr McSweeney left that his successor reported the missing donations to the Electoral Commission. Under the Political Parties, Elections and Referendums Act, MPs are required to check that donations and loans over £500 come from permissible sources and to register donations over £1,500 within 30 days. This includes financial support, loans, gifts of property and support in kind. The MP's Code of Conduct, Section 1, Category 2B, defines donations liable for declaration as any other support received by a member. This includes support received indirectly, for example, via a political club. The think tank failed to declare significant financial and in-kind support, waited months to disclose donations, and sought to downplay the issue as an administrative error. This is not a minor oversight. Hundreds of thousands of pounds are at stake. It strikes at the heart of transparency, integrity, and public trust in the political process. Today, I can reveal that a complaint has been submitted to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards by a member of the public against Keir Starmer for failing to declare the support he got from Labour Together. It's now up to him to take action on Mr McSweeney's failure to adhere to parliamentary rules on donations and declarations. For a Prime Minister and his team, proving their integrity and adherence to these rules isn't optional, it's mandatory. Think what Starmer said about Boris, and failing to do so raises serious doubts about the judgment and accountability of those at the top of government. As always, as ever, let me know your views. mailmog@gbnews.com. And it must be noted that we approached Number 10 for a response from Mr McSweeney, but Number 10 refused to comment. Well, I'm now joined by a man with direct experience of dealing with the Electoral Commission, Councillor Darren Grimes. Darren, I'm very grateful you've joined me, because it seems to me that the lefty Electoral Commission has been stunningly wet in this. When it was vote leave, you were absolutely dragged through a process that went on for years when you were ultimately completely exonerated.
That's absolutely right, Jacob. I thank you for shining a light on this two-tier hypocrisy, as you do almost every night. You know, the fact of the matter is that this is a two-tier government, a two-tier administration. What I remember quite vividly, I was in my early 20s. You don't forget your early 20s. They're meant to be some of the best years of your life. Well, actually, mine were made utter hell. You know, I was investigated 3 times by the quango known as the Electoral Commission. And former members of the Labour Party and current members of the administration and government right now, they actually claimed that I ought to have been jailed. You know, I was ultimately fined £20,000, which, Jacob, as you've just mentioned, is more than the £14,000 for 20 breaches. And there weren't 3 investigations. There wasn't a police investigation. The CPS weren't involved. There hasn't been a court case involved. And yet this led to a man being directly placed in number 10 Downing Street, the seat of power within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, does that not tell you that from everyone from Labour Party members, the members of this current government, to the Labour-friendly members of His Majesty's King's Council and all the rest of it, they are effectively a cartel, a cabal that says that if you have the right kind of politics, well, it's A-OK, Jacob. And that's the problem I have here.
But you get away scot-free, and that the donations were £700,000, a much bigger sum of money than was involved in your case, that you were fined £20,000, which was then rescinded by the court. You were harassed by the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. None of this has happened. The Electoral Commission seems to have brushed it under the carpet, said nothing to see here, because it's their lefty friends.
That's exactly right. You know, over £100,000 of that coming whilst he was running Starmer's leadership campaign as well. And the Electoral Commission apparently gave a warning back in 2017. Well, Jacob, I never had any of that. You know, I was a student at the time, don't forget, of the Brexit referendum. I was doing this on my own. Well, they've had the whole apparatus of the Labour Party so-called moderates. I would argue with that definition, Jacob, as you well know. But actually, they had that warning. They had the legal advice. They had the advice to declare sums over £7,500, but actually they declared precious few donations. And the fact of the matter is, had this been a member of Nigel Farage's closest allies getting Nigel into number 10, you can bet your bottom dollar that these very same people would be calling for Nigel's head.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And if you look at what Starmer said about Boris and about how the people who make the laws can't be above the laws, the hypocrisy of this is extraordinary. And it does come back to Starmer himself, because members of Parliament have to report support that they are given directly or indirectly. And as far as one can tell, and it's been admitted by Labour figures, Labour together existed to get Keir Starmer to be leader of the Labour Party and get rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
Exactly. The polling, the research, the staff time, all of these things all add up to that apparatus, that machinery behind Sir Keir Starmer, which propels him into number 10 in a loveless landslide that was that election of last year. And ultimately, you know, all of these things add up. They have an effect. These are the things that they argued about our campaign for Brexit. But actually, all of the EU side, which had, of course, everything from Soros cash to the big vested interests as far as the Remain campaign's concerned, the Prime Minister of the time, let's not forget as well. None of those things had the same level of scrutiny applied to them. And that, I think, goes to the very heart of the issue here. Where is the scrutiny? Where are the members of the King's Council calling for actually there to be a thorough investigation into what actually went down? If they care about the sanctity of the ballot box, where are they now, Jacob? That's what I ask.
And this is a crucial test for the Electoral Commission to try and redeem itself, because the Conservatives have put in a complaint, and we'll now see whether they're willing to investigate Labour and senior figures in the government in the way they investigated you.
Well, Jacob, you are far too important to hold your breath. I shall not ask you to hold your breath, because actually I think if you did, you'd be in a very dangerous territory. Ultimately, right, the same people that were leading the investigation into me, the 3 investigations into me, of which there was a court case and I was cleared by the police and the court, that actually they are now in positions of power and influence within the Electoral Commission. The entire Quango state is stacked against those with right of centre opinions. And I'm afraid that view of mine has not changed in the 10 years I've been active in politics.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining me. Much appreciated. I now want to go to my panel, Gawain Taylor and Matthew Stadler. Matthew, I'm going to come to you first to try and put the case for the defence. I think the most serious thing is the failure of Keir Starmer to register this in his Register of Members' Interests. As a Member of Parliament, I knew very clearly that indirect support had to be declared. He seems not to have done this for an organisation that is recognised to be instrumental for his leadership campaign.
From the outset, I would say that if Keir Starmer or Morgan McSweeney or anyone else associated with this government has done anything wrong, they obviously need to be properly scrutinised and ultimately held to account for that. I don't care who is in power. We should all stand united in demanding the highest standards from public servants, not least, of course, the Prime Minister. I can't sit here on national television and tell you from what I've heard and read so far that Keir Starmer has done anything wrong. You've heard the denials from both Labour and also from Number 10. What I would say to you is that I've been on your show before where you have attacked a public body. In that instance, it was the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility. And this evening, you've had a pop at the Electoral Commission, and you have said that the Electoral Commission have lefty friends. It's really important to point out that the Electoral Commission is an independent public body and that regulates elections and public finances. And therefore, I ask you, as a responsible journalist, I ask you, Jacob, to give me evidence...
Oh, the treatment of Darren.
Hang on, to give me evidence that the Electoral Commission has lefty friends. You can think that the treatment of Darren was wrong and that fines were rescinded. I'm asking you what your evidence is for your specific claim that they have lefty friends.
Can I come in here?
Yeah.
The Electoral Commission, on the day before a general election, because Gordon Brown accused the Brexit Party of receiving money from Russia, the very day, the next morning, they raided the Brexit Party's offices on election day, paralysing our ability to campaign on that day, because Gordon Brown accused us of something that was not true. Now, the Electoral Commission takes months. We'd been talking to them. We'd been asking them to come and check our figures for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they did nothing until their lefty friend, Gordon Brown, accused us of something that was false, and they came heavy-handed. Oh, by the way, they also told the press they were turning up, and so the media were outside our office as well.
So you've just said that the Electoral Commission
raided
were
our office.
Friends with Gordon Brown.
Well, he made a statement. He made a statement and they jumped.
That is a massive leap. If either of you feel,
he made a statement,
if either of you
jumped.
feel that the Electoral Commission has behaved inequitably or unjustly, then provided you have proper evidence for that, it's obviously in the public interest that you say that. I am asking for evidence, and you are hitting me with stories that are extremely difficult simply to accept as evidence that you purport it to
so
be.
What evidence do you need?
The treatment of Darren Grimes is extraordinary, that they fail in the end and Darren wins in the court. They pursue somebody backing Vote Leave. They show no interest in examining what the Remain campaign did. They don't even look at it. They go...
Jacob, this very story is based on the Electoral Commission, based in part on the Electoral Commission having fined this organisation, this left-leaning organisation, and you now say the fines were not big enough.
Compared to what they did to Darren Grimes, piddling.
I'm not saying that the Electoral Commission got it wrong in relation to Darren Grimes, because clearly they rescinded
that's right,
a fine.
And he won in the courts.
What I am saying is that to leap from that to say that, to assert on national TV that they have lefty friends, I think is a worrying jump.
All right, I think the Electoral Commission is part of the left-wing blob. It is part of the quangocracy. that the appointments within it are people of the left. And that is how it operates.
But who would have appointed figures in the Electoral Commission during, for example, the 14 years in which we had Conservative Prime Ministers in number 10?
They get appointed by commissions that appoint these people.
Yeah. But you were in charge. You guys were running our country for 14 years, initially with the help of the Lib Dems.
And they were able to thwart appointments. So Paul Dacre was going to be the chairman of Ofcom, and that was thwarted by the civil service against the direct desire of the Prime Minister, as he then was, Boris Johnson. So yes, there's very good evidence for the Quangos being under the control of the blob.
When very
very
rarely a right of centre figure gets onto a Quango, they are put to the sword. Toby Young, Roger Scruton, falsely accused, sacked, and even half the Tory party went after him.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of statements. A spokesman for Labour Together said, Labour Together proactively raised concerns about its own reporting of donations to the Electoral Commission in 2020. Investigation with which Labour Together fully cooperated was completed in 2021. The outcome was made public. The word proactive is entirely unnecessary. Active will do. A spokesman for the Electoral Commission said, the Commission investigated the late reporting of donations by Labour Together and published our findings in 2021. We were satisfied that the evidence proved beyond reasonable doubt that failures by the association occurred without reasonable excuse. Offences were determined and they were sanctioned accordingly. We have received the letter from the Conservative Party and are considering the information they have shared. We will respond in due course. Well, I look forward very much to seeing that response, though under Darren's advice, I won't be holding my breath. Thank you to Darren. Thank you to my panel. Coming up in just a moment. That's such bad luck you weren't getting to hear Keir Starmer. Why are Britons treated worse than illegal migrants? A High Court has blocked the first UK-France removal of an Eritrean man. Footage shows foreign criminals being handed £2,000 to leave the country, and an urgent review is launched after a £600 taxpayer-funded taxi was used to take an asylum seeker to a GP appointment. Does the government actually want to get this under control?
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Are you panicking when you're in Northern Ireland when you go out and about because there is a lack of chargers?
Well, listen, I'm really pro-EV, and we've had the odd issue with broken EV chargers, particularly yesterday at both Ballymoney at Beasties and also over at Dunsilley. We had issues with chargers, but the charging infrastructure is used very rarely. My mother, for example, she has overnight charging at home. She's never used a public charger, and she's had the car for 3 years. Yeah. So if you've got that domestic overnight charging, it's cheap. It's very affordable if you buy a 2-year-old EV, and they are absolutely the way forward. I'm a Yorkshireman. I don't like parting with my brass. I want to get cheap motoring, and for less than a penny a mile and a car for less than 20 grand to start with, you know, it sounds a bit blasé saying £20,000, but relative to what these cars are new, they're incredible value for money, and we're seeing mass adoption. There's a garage in Richmond in North Yorkshire that sells more than half of the cars they sell are electric vehicles, and that's in a rural Dales area. So it's about having that domestic overnight charging and not having to rely on public infrastructure.
Danny, where it doesn't convince me at all is, right, so I'm living in London and I want to go to see Manchester United, and I might get there, but am I going to get back down again? Or worse still, if I'm not on full charge, I'm going to miss kickoff because I'm going to have to rely on a public charger somewhere. So is that the sort of anxiety? I mean, you were talking about range anxiety there, Ellie. Is that the sort of anxiety people have? I mean, I genuinely have that. Despite what we were hearing there from Fraser.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about donations to Labour Together. And the mailmogs have come steaming in. Lots of them, actually. Tom says it took the Conservatives 14 years to reach this level of sleaze. Labour has achieved this level of sleaze in just over 1 year. Richard says, and Richard's a very good point, one can just imagine how Starmer and his colleagues would be screaming for resignations, inquiries and a general election if this were a Conservative donation. And Kat, I really like what you've said, and I want to share my support for what you say. Congratulations, Darren. You stood up against the establishment, and truth prevailed. The migration crisis is showing no signs of subsiding after a High Court injunction blocked the first removal of an Eritrean man under the UK-France one-in, one-out scheme. Meanwhile, footage shows foreign criminals being handed £2,000 in taxpayer-funded cash to encourage voluntary removal. Meanwhile, an urgent review has been ordered after an asylum seeker said he had taken a £600 taxpayer-funded taxi to and from a GP appointment. Will the government ever put British citizens first? Well, my panel is still with me, the former spokesman for Reform, Gwaine Tola, and the political commentator Matthew Stadlin. Gwaine, let me come to you first, because this is Reform's pet subject. Just what's going on in the courts. I thought the government actually put a pretty robust case to the court and said you are undermining confidence by making these decisions. And the court just doesn't care.
And the court doesn't care. The court has to apply the law. The law clearly needs to change. The Labour government are not willing to change the law. Thus, we get these sort of situations. And I do believe the Labour government wants to sort this out. I really do. Because they can see that each time this happens, support for my lot grows and support for their lot diminishes. And so they clearly do want, but there's nothing they can do because they won't bite the bullet and change the law. And in the end, judges just apply the law. And if the judge has decided to not let this Eritrean go to Paris, that is because the judge was applying the law. And so the lack of will, they would like things to get better. They'd like things to change. They would like Chappie not to get his taxi for 600 quid. They'd like this fellow to be sent to France. They'd like that. But they cannot unless they change the law.
Matthew, isn't Gwaine right that we have turned the law in such a way that ministerial decision-making is replaced by judicial opinion? That these aren't really straight facts. They're judgments as to whether you think something is on the whole a good idea or a bad idea, rather than the old idea of law, which is a much clearer, is this what the law says? And the Human Rights Act and so on has allowed judges to apply their discretion where it used to be ministerial discretion.
Well, first of all, you seem to be at odds, you two, because I was rather reassured to hear you, as a Reform board member, defending the judiciary. Because it's all too easy to take pop shots at our judges. So good for you, in my view, on that. As for your position, Jacob, as you inflect your eyebrows, I'm sorry, and this isn't particularly helpful, if at all, to the Labour government. No. But hearing someone who was very senior in the Conservative years complain about what we have done to the law, it is simply a fact that you guys were in number 10 for 14 years.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to address that.
Yes, and we did one very important thing legally, and that was the repeal of the European Communities Act 1972, which means there is no longer axiomatically senior law in this country to an Act of Parliament. But the Human Rights Act is the real problem with these deportations.
Let me come to some of the substance. Obviously, it seems to me completely absurd that someone, whether they're a failed asylum seeker or someone who hasn't yet had their claim decided upon, it is being given a £600 return taxi ride. The reason apparently is because asylum seekers move to different parts of the country, and sometimes they keep the same doctor, but they should be able to take the train, as I think this asylum seeker himself said. He said it was crazy. So clearly that does need to be looked into. But I do wish, Jacob, that you wouldn't continue to pit, in your position of responsibility and authority, asylum seekers and immigrants, and of course there are differences. There's legal immigrants, there are illegal immigrants, there are asylum seekers and so forth. But please stop, you're fully entitled to, but please stop pitting them against the rest of us, because I don't think that that is a way for society to come together. Yes, we need to try to stop the boats. Yes, the government is trying, as your government is tried to do so. But I'm increasingly concerned about the rhetoric that is spreading in this country. We saw 150,000, it's estimated, people marching behind the flag of Tommy Robinson. Now, by no means all of those people, by no means of all those people will have seen themselves as far right.
They're not.
But Tommy Robinson demonstrably has a far-right past.
I'm sorry, Matthew.
In my view, an extremely divisive figure.
You talk about being divisive. You were literally... You said, no, they're not far right, but actually they're all marching behind Tommy Robinson.
They marched behind someone whose past they knew all about.
They marched with, but that's by the by.
It was organised by Tommy Robinson,
You are shifting the argument away from actually what's going on here.
You are risking
shifting the argument
an
away.
Overlap, a dangerous overlap between Reform, which wants to win a general election, and Tommy Robinson.
Matthew, stop for a second. This has nothing to do with Tommy Robinson. It's nothing to do with the rally on the Saturday last. This is to do with the fact that our government, your government, the Labour government, wants to change things but won't change the law. You've got to leave the ECHR. You've got to repeal the HRA, or this stuff will continue to happen. And they do not have the honies to do so. They cannot do it because they are in love with, they are committed to a system of international law that goes against everything that's in our tradition, goes against everything how we work as a nation. And by bringing the ECHR into national law through the Human Rights Act, we brought in a completely different system. We lost sovereignty over our own systems. Whilst I agree, and I'm not attacking judges for making decisions based on that law, I am attacking this government and the last government for not addressing that and removing this poison from our legal system.
I'm not for a second saying that there are not issues on our borders, that there are not issues with the boats.
And our legal system.
What I am saying is that the rhetoric used by, amongst others, you, Jacob, risks there being a poisonous overlap between the Tommy Robinson Brigade and Reform, where you want to form the next government of this country. By the way, I do not think we should leave the ECHR.
Then in which case you are happy for this to continue happening?
I'm not happy for it. My primary reason for wanting us not to leave the ECHR is you look around us and we would literally be joining Belarus and Russia.
You live in this weird world.
We would make ourselves on the outside of civilised European society.
Rubbish. We have our own law. We have been defending our rights and liberties in this country for centuries. We do not need a European text. We do not need a European court to defend our liberties. We can do that ourselves.
Depends who becomes the next government and what they want, and to what extent they want to make friends with Tommy Robinson.
But Matthew, that's what I want to come back to, because that's really important, because I think we both have the same concern. I don't want the extreme fringe to prosper. And I think the extreme fringe has been prospering because mainstream politicians have been too nervous to talk about immigration, been too nervous to represent the concerns.
About almost nothing else, Jacob.
But that's relatively recent, and this problem has been rising, and that people feel that their elected politicians haven't been taking them seriously.
Some people feel, and I can understand that.
And that, I think, is the problem, which is why people like me have to start talking about this, because if we don't, look what's happening in continental Europe, where you've got much more right-wing parties than anything we've got here, and where the Tommy Robinson equivalents are really mainstream. So we're very lucky that as right-wing as we get is Gawain, which isn't too frightening.
You would be very clear, Jacob, as Nigel Farage has been, that you want nothing to do with Tommy Robinson. I think it's important for your audience to know that very, very clearly.
Tommy Robinson has a criminal record, including for mortgage fraud. He is not the sort of person I wish to see.
But not just that, it's his views on certain areas, the Islamophobia that he has clearly expressed, I hope you will distance yourself from. Because then we can start to have a conversation, a responsible conversation about
you are
important
switching
things.
this. You are switching this
Tommy
from
Robinson
government
is not where
responsibility.
British politics needs to be. Anyway, thank you very much to my panel. In a moment, Britain now has more parking wardens than full-time soldiers, waging war on the motorist, with councils raking in £2.3 billion from fines and permits last year alone.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Western and central parts of Europe will start to see any heavy downpours easing away, though some scattered showers will still remain. That's not so much the case across the Canary Islands, Madeira, also Spain and Portugal. Mostly settled here, largely dry, plenty of sunny spells. But across France, even into parts of Germany, we could still see some isolated showers remain. But through Italy, the Adriatic coastline and also parts of Greece remaining settled, dry with sunny spells, though we could start to see more showers over the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Over the coming days, it should remain mostly dry and a rather settled picture. Still chilly overnight with some fog possible during the early hours of the morning. That's before some rainfall as we head towards the weekend. But the reason it's so dry and settled over the coming days, it's all due to high pressure situated to the northeast of the country. But eventually, we'll start to see some systems move in from the Atlantic. Now through into the evening, it is going to turn chilly as soon as the sun goes down, remaining mostly dry, plenty of clear skies, particularly in the west. So it's likely we'll see some frost here through the early hours of the morning, also some mist and fog, but more cloud across parts of the southeast. So it's not going to turn quite as chilly here, but many towns and cities mostly in the mid to high single figures. So across Scotland to start the day, once again, it is going to be fairly chilly, particularly in any rural spots. Mostly dry, though we could start to see some high cloud build in from the west, a very slight chance of some isolated spells of rain here. Northern Ireland and northern parts of England, it should be a mostly dry and bright start, but once again, some mist and fog in places, and fairly similar elsewhere across the rest of England and Wales, and still fairly breezy around southeastern coasts too. But through Thursday, it'll be fairly similar to what we saw today. Mostly dry, plenty of sunny spells, wall-to-wall blue skies for many areas. But western parts of Scotland, it is still going to be fairly breezy here, some high cloud pushing in. That will just create hazier spells of sunshine. But for most, it should be a mostly pleasant day. Temperatures will just start to push into the low 20s around the London area, but elsewhere, mid to high teens, and still remaining fairly breezy around southeastern coasts. Through into Friday, once again, another chilly start, some mist and fog patches possible, but more clouds starting to push into the very far southeast. A chance we could see an isolated shower push through, and similar across the far northeast of England, and also Scotland too could see the odd isolated shower. But many, once again, it should be a mostly dry day. That's before a more unsettled picture as we head into Saturday. It's likely we'll see spells of rain and some possible strong winds.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
New figures show Bureaucracy Britain now has more parking wardens than full-time soldiers, and councils are bringing in record revenue from fines and charges. Figures show around 82,000 traffic enforcement officers, that sounds so grand, doesn't it, rather than parking wardens, patrol the nation, while the British Army has just over 73,000 troops. Last year, councils made £2.3 billion from parking, with a profit of £1.2 billion, driven by rising fines, permits and on-street charges. What does this discrepancy say about the state of Britain? Well, I'm extremely pleased to be joined this evening by the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. Lord Dannatt, thank you so much for joining me. This really is awful, isn't it, that the army's getting smaller, but the army of sort of tin pot traffic wardens is getting bigger and bigger.
Well, Jacob, good evening. I'm sure traffic wardens do a very good job. 20 years ago, when I was head of the army, there was a story running in the media that traffic wardens were being paid more than new private soldiers, and that turned out to be the case. So this is not a new story, but it's a problem. I think what you're really getting at is the twin difficulty of the army, in particular, recruiting up to its established strength, and whether the government, and this is the big issue, has got enough money to pay for the defence that we need. And I'm afraid, looking at the world today and the security issues facing us, despite great promises to get to 3.5% of GDP on defence by sometime around 2035, that just doesn't cut it. We've got to spend more on defence, and immediately we've got to spend more on our soldiers.
And if you were still head of the army, what would your plan be to get the army back to full strength? What numbers do you think are needed to deal with the threats that we currently face, particularly from Russia?
Well, Jacob, that's a good question, and it's quite difficult to quantify that. I think numbers of soldiers is one thing. That's numbers of regular soldiers is one thing. A number of reservists is another. But the thing that worries me more is the equipment that we are putting in the hands of our soldiers at the present moment. The army in particular has been serially uninvested in over the last 20 or 30 years, almost since the end of the Cold War. And that's a really serious issue, that it's the equipment that we haven't got that matters more than the soldiers that we haven't got. Now, as far as recruiting is concerned, it's been a perennial problem that when the economy is fairly buoyant, which by and large unemployment is not bad, it is quite difficult for the army to recruit. And also, slightly counterintuitively, when the army is not involved in a major campaign somewhere and soldiers doing daring things on the television screens every night are not there, it's actually quite difficult to attract some of our young people to want to join. There's always a section of our youngsters who want to pit themselves against what's going on in the world. And that, ironically, is good for recruiting for the armed forces and good for recruiting for the army. So there's a whole range of problems that the army has got to get, but has got the army and the government have got to deal with. One of which is the rates of pay today, and one of which is the sort of overall set of circumstances for the army, and in particular the equipment that we're investing in to put in the hands of our soldiers against the modern day threats which we're seeing so eloquently described in the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely. And in the Ukraine, things have changed, haven't they, because of developments with drones and so on. How ready is the British Army, in your view, to deal with that type of warfare? Very different from the type of warfare that they were fighting in Afghanistan.
Well, of course, you're absolutely right. And it's been a very interesting sort of paradox, really, that early in the Ukraine war, we still are training lots of Ukrainian young people to be recruits to go into their front lines. But because they are in the front line and they have been fighting this very difficult and fast evolving war against the Russians, the tactics and the equipment that they are using have evolved extraordinarily quickly, and they now have got lessons to teach us. Now, the Army knows that, and the Ministry of Defence knows that, and we are learning the lessons that the Ukrainians can teach us as fast as we can, while at the same time we are teaching Ukrainian recruits the basics of soldiering. And, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, and that invention wheel goes around extraordinarily fast when you're in a combat situation, which the Ukrainians are, and we are now learning lessons from them, from the battlefield, on their coattails.
Lord Dannatt, thank you very much for sharing your experience and knowledge with my viewers tonight. In a moment, there's another battle in the war on motorists. A leading left-wing think tank wants the Chancellor to tax drivers for every mile they travel to plug the $30 billion black hole created by Rachel Reeves's bungling. Is the motorist footing the bill for socialist failure?
GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
Will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The war on the motorist continues as the Resolution Foundation urges the Chancellor to introduce a pay-per-mile tax. Surprised they didn't call it a pay-per-kilometre tax, being lefties. The plan would replace falling fuel duty revenues as some drivers switch to electric cars, suggesting charging between 3p and 9p per mile, depending on vehicle weight, raising up to $20 billion a year to help fill Britain's $30 billion and rising fiscal gap. Will the war on the motorist ever end? Well, I've still got my most pertinacious panel with me, Gawain Toler and Matthew Stadlen. Matthew, now you can't deny that these people are lefties, are they?
Well, what I was going to
Resolution
say
Foundation.
is, as someone who is greeted in the street and in train stations by GB News viewers who want selfies with me despite me being a lefty, even though I don't see myself as a lefty, let me answer on behalf of lefties. You said that we would refer to kilometres. I don't refer to kilometres. I refer to miles.
Very glad to hear it.
This sort of pushing together of people on the left with all sorts of bizarre ways of living life is just... It's got to stop.
Well,
the mile lives on.
He is, isn't he? Yes.
Clearly avoiding the subject.
The answer to this is, as I've been reading, seems to be that fuel duty is suffering because people are moving from petrol cars and diesel cars to electric vehicles. And so there is a hole being left there. You've put it down to Rachel Reeves' mismanagement of the economy, as you argue it is, even though we've done a little well in growth at times this year. But actually, isn't it, the inflation is not good. Isn't it actually the case that we need to replace lost revenue from fuel duty?
Well, is that a fair argument, that you could get rid of the petrol tax altogether and just charge people per mile, and then it would be fair. You would pay as you drove.
No, the Desolation Foundation does what it does every single time. It comes up with these ideas. This is clearly an attack on drivers. And, of course, it is something that's most damaging in the shires where people need cars. I don't have a car in London because I don't need a car in London because I've got public transport. But if I was living in the sticks, I would need one. So who gets hurt? Not the urban voters who vote Labour, but the people outside the urban areas. And so miles of kilometres is neither here nor there. We killed this off. We killed this idea off years ago when the EU wanted the Galileo and they wanted to bring in to pay for their great idea. Now, why have we have this problem with the tax revenue dropping? Because the government has its war on petrochemicals, has its war on the net zero agenda. So the net zero agenda crucifies the exchequer, forces people to buy over the odds and expensive cars, electric cars,
Matthew, let me bring you in, Matthew.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're using a lot of emotive language, including a war on motorists. I am a motorist. I use my car quite a bit. I was driving to and from Wiltshire today. I'll be doing it again tomorrow. I use my car where I can't reasonably use a train, and sometimes, perhaps when I could reasonably use a train, but I choose to drive. So it would definitely hit me if we were being taxed by the mile. What I would say, where I have some sympathy with you, is not on the government's desire to move us away from petrol and diesel. That seems to me, to use that terrible phrase, common sense, this time using it from a left-leaning perspective, although it's not just people on the left who care about the environment, by the way.
No, I've always cared about the environment.
But what I would say is, of course, you have to, as a government, be careful about punishing people you don't intend to punish. People in rural communities, people driving the stereotypical white van, including coming into London and other major cities in this country, you've got to be really careful that that doesn't have a negative impact on them, such that the economy then struggles as a consequence.
LTNs,
all these traffic wardens,
the traffic wardens. You've got
congestion changes,
you've got this, that, the other, everything.
Well, we want traffic wardens. Are you on a free-for-all, Jacob? But you've got to have rhyme and reason to where people are entitled to park.
The vast expansion of today, if I wanted to park a car near where I live, I have to park 2.5 miles away. Because I'm not staying, because I'm basically sofa surfing, I'm not staying in somewhere I live, and there is nowhere I can park for free within 2.5 miles. It is impossible.
You think this is
so that was not the case in the past.
You think this is only to benefit councils who we know are struggling, many of them?
I do think this is.
Or is it actually to benefit local residents who might want to be able to park outside their homes without people who are coming from elsewhere parking outside their house?
It is never full anymore. It's never overburdened with cars because nobody can afford to park there. So what you're seeing is basically, it is clearly...
Most of the streets I try to park on in London are full.
The amount of bits of legislation and the amount of bits of regulation ranged against people who just want to get from A to B.
Steady on. The sums apparently suggest that the average person, the average driver, I think, is paying £70 in parking tickets a year, although it's higher because that's using UK population against English parking tickets. If I'm right on that, that's not massive, because a parking ticket around where I am is roughly £70.
Well, what do you deal with it in the first 20 minutes, the first 2 days or 3 days?
I hate getting parking tickets there.
I hate it, of course you do. I'm so forgetful that I get them so often. I try and say, well, I'm paying a bit more in tax.
All right, on our dislike of parking tickets, which you find very difficult to get in Somerset, lots of legal parking in Somerset, that's all from me. Up next is Alex Armstrong, standing in for Patrick Christys. Alex, what are you going to be talking about this evening?
Well, Donald Trump thinks all our countries are going to hell, Jacob. And I'm going to be digging into that with footage to prove it. It's my last time covering Patrick for a little while, so I'm going to be having a bombshell show tonight, I promise you that. Carrie Lake's going to be coming on to talk about how Trump has managed to deport 2 million illegal migrants and how we might be able to replicate it here on the show. And if you're a Muslim man who wields a knife and commits an assault, should you be allowed to get off of an assault charge? Very easily, which is what's happened with our courts. So much more on the show and all of that. I look forward to seeing you all.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Over the coming days, it should remain mostly dry and a rather settled picture. Still chilly overnight with some fog possible during the early hours of the morning. That's before some rainfall as we head towards the weekend. But the reason it's so dry and settled over the coming days, it's all due to high pressure situated to the northeast of the country. But eventually, we'll start to see some systems move in from the Atlantic. Now through into the evening, it is going to turn chilly as soon as the sun goes down, remaining mostly dry, plenty of clear skies, particularly in the west. So it's likely we'll see some frost here through the early hours of the morning, also some mist and fog, but more cloud across parts of the southeast. So it's not going to turn quite as chilly here, but many towns and cities mostly in the mid to high single figures. So across Scotland to start the day, once again it is going to be fairly chilly, particularly in any rural spots. Mostly dry, though we could start to see some high cloud build in from the west, a very slight chance of some isolated spells of rain here. Northern Ireland and northern parts of England, it should be a mostly dry and bright start, but once again some mist and fog in places, and fairly similar elsewhere across the rest of England and Wales, and still fairly breezy around southeastern coasts too. But through Thursday it'll be fairly similar to what we saw today, mostly dry, plenty of sunny spells, wall-to-wall blue skies for many areas. But western parts of Scotland, it is still going to be fairly breezy here, some high cloud pushing in. That will just create hazier spells of sunshine. But for most, it should be a mostly pleasant day. Temperatures will just start to push into the low 20s around the London area, but elsewhere mid to high teens, and still remaining fairly breezy around southeastern coasts. Through into Friday, once again, another chilly start, some mist and fog patches possible, but more clouds starting to push into the very far southeast. A chance we could see an isolated shower push through, and similar across the far northeast of England, and also Scotland too could see the odd isolated shower. But many, once again, it should be a mostly dry day. That's before a more unsettled picture as we head into Saturday. It's likely we'll see spells of rain and some possible strong winds.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
You could bank an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. And if that wasn't enough, you'll also get to drive away in this brand new motorhome. This brand new 2025 Benimar Primero could be yours. It comes with all the mod cons you'd expect from a vehicle worth over £74,000 and comfortably sleeps 4 people. This prize package is worth over £104,000. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 9 p.m. I'm Alex Armstrong covering for Patrick Christie's Tonight.
It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
Well, President Trump's not wrong, is he? Europe and Britain have gone to hell, and migration is 100% to blame. Also tonight.
We don't know what it was exactly. And right now they're jamming our VHS, as you can hear. We do not know where...
Yes, it's SOS. Greta's Gaza-bound flotilla has come under attack from a drone blasting ABBA. Plus, on the same day that we officially welcome to the UK nearly as many migrants as we've managed to send back to France, this is the line our Home Secretary decided to go with.
I am also worried about the rise of the far right.
Yeah, they're not trying to distract from anything, are they? Also tonight, the most dangerous ruling I've seen in Britain to date. A knife-wielding Muslim man who attacked a protester burning a Quran outside the Turkish embassy is, guess what, spared jail. Plus, foreign criminals paid $2 grand to agree to be deported, and illegal migrants are getting taxpayer-funded taxis. Why are Brits always at the back of the queue? And on my panel tonight is director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the journalist Nina Mishkow. And an anti-ICE gunman has shot a migrant dead in America.
Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country.
Yes, we'll go live to Bev Turner in Washington, D.C. for all the latest on that story. Your Wednesday night starts right here. Britain is going to hell. Next.
Alex, thank you very much. The top stories. The first family has arrived in the UK under Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's one-in, one-out